Hello, everyone. This is Dorie Clark, and we are here for our weekly dose of Better, the Newsweek live stream interview show. Our guest this week is Jennifer Moss. She is the author of the new book, The Burnout Epidemic. And we are going to be talking about how to manage burnout, which I suspect is perhaps a salient topic for many of us in corporate and organizational life these days. Jennifer, so glad to have you here.
It's so great to be with you, Dorie.
Wonderful. And for all of those who are tuning in from around the world, please type into the chat box. Let us know who you are and where you are watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and also to take your questions for Jennifer about burnout and all the ancillary topics. So Jen, the first question that I have, certainly this is a remarkably timely book. When did you come up with the topic? Was this like day one of the pandemic, you're like, yes, let's do it? Or had this been brewing previously? What is the genesis here?
I'd been actually writing about burnout for maybe about 6 or 7 years, and studying workplace wellness for a lot longer than that. And what I had discovered, sort of being this person that was brought in to support happiness strategy, which was really ahead of its time. At that point, it was sort of like a nice to have. And I was there, and I was realizing that a lot of people were being given ice cream when they need water. And for me, that really stuck. I just felt like, okay, these people don't need these perks. They do at a point when they're healthy, but they're not healthy. So how do we get them there? So I started writing about it. I spent a lot of time with Harvard Business Review, sort of researching and writing with them. And then I started writing the book, and 20,000 to 30,000 words scrapped. The pandemic hit, and there was just so much tone deafness in it. It just didn't feel right. And not talking about remote work, because there was only 4% of the global workforce working remote at the time, and then 35%. So I had to sort of start new, but there was a lot of other legacy stuff and the root causes of burnout that I had included. So it has definitely been a passion project for a long time.
That's great. Jennifer Moss is here with us. She is the author of the book, The Burnout Epidemic. So an important question for most of us who are watching, much like medical students who, read the Grey's Anatomy and then are like, I think I have that.
Yes.
How do we know if we're burned out? I think everybody has, sort of maybe some elevated stress after the past couple of years. We kind of all want a vacation, possibly we need a vacation, but how do we actually tell if that's legitimately burned out or not? What's the definition? What's the tripwire?
That is a really important question, because for a long time we've had this sort of nebulous definition of burnout, and that's played a role in people feeling stigmatized by it. And, there is a definition that was finally, created. It had been 40 years in the making, mind you, but in 2019, the World Health Organization identified burnout as institutional stress, occupational stress left unmanaged. And it shows up in these 3 major signs of exhaustion and depletion, and not just I'm feeling fatigued, but, waking up in the morning and feeling just like you can't get out of bed. It's really hard to make it through a day. High levels of disengagement from your work, and not like how we measure engagement and disengagement inside of organizations, but more like this mental and emotional distance from our jobs. We're not feeling like we're good at what we do anymore. We don't feel like we're adding value. We're not contributing. And then finally, this level of cynicism. So how often are we using words like, it's always going to be like this, it's never going to change, we have no control, we feel very consistent negativity towards our jobs or our workplaces. And if we're feeling this like 2 or 3 times a week or more over time, that's when we start to be at risk of burnout. And there's a difference between symptoms of burnout and hitting the wall. When we hit the wall, that is when we need to seek out support, therapeutics, pharmacological supports potentially, and other types of professional, mental health support. So that's the difference. And we could be feeling these symptoms and then be okay, but it's when we really feel all of these in tandem over time and it's not getting better, that's where we're really at the potential risk of hitting that wall.
Really helpful. Thank you. We're here with Jennifer Moss. She is the author of the new book, The Burnout Epidemic. And I'm Dorie Clark. We're here with our weekly interview show, Better, which is sponsored by Newsweek. If you're enjoying the conversation, hit the like button, hit the share button so your friends can benefit. And we want to make sure to greet some of the wonderful folks who are tuning in from around the world. We have Kristen joining us from Philly. We have Oana from Athens, Greece. We have Haley from Dallas. Sylvia is joining us from Nigeria. We have Diana from Portugal. We have also Diana from South Carolina. We have Bauna from India. We have Shay from New Hampshire. Renee is joining from Costa Rica. Dominique from New Jersey. We have a LinkedIn friend from Ohio State. We've got Susan joining us. We've got Jenny from New Hampshire. And Larnie is joining us from the nation's capital. I love it. We're so glad to have all of you here. We're taking your questions for Jennifer Moss. She is an expert on burnout. Jennifer, something that I was fascinated by in your bio is that you are a member of a United Nations committee that is studying global happiness and looking at the most and the least happy nations around the world. What have you learned from these experiences, and where should we all move?
Yes. Yeah. Well, Finland, the Netherlands, Sweden, we're always looking at these type Norway and, places where it seems like there's a lot of social supports. And we've also found that there is a lot of options for our political leaders. It's interesting. That's a big part. Trust in government plays a massive role in whether we're happy. Obviously, there's less gaps and economic disparities, and those are really big ones. But, the work that the council does is really try to look at, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals when it comes to well-being, and think, how does this all play a role? And for the World Happiness Report, I contributed to the workplace section of that and looked at just what is it about systems inside of organizations that are healthy and how that contributes to their communities, but also globally. When we start to have more conscious capitalism, when we're starting to think of doing good and producing good products and having ethics behind how we think about, the way that we build really exciting innovations with mental health, well-being, with humans at the forefront. That is really what we're trying to get across, and realizing that you can be extremely successful, have great shareholder value, stakeholder value, your customers are happier and your employees are happier by doing that kind of human-centered effort. It doesn't mean that you have to, that's an expense. That's a nice to have. It's actually something that tangibly brings results for a lot of organizations. So I'm hoping that this realization that when we have burned out people, that it has a massive impact on attrition and bottom line issues, that maybe we'll start to move this thinking into the right direction.
That's great. Thank you very much, Jennifer Moss. She's the author of the book, The Burnout Epidemic. We also wanted to say hi to our great friends tuning in. Raul is joining us from Miami. We have LinkedIn friends from Houston and the Bay Area. Deborah's in Fayetteville, Georgia. Cheryl's in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Sushma is back from India. We've got Thais from Sao Paulo. We have Donato from Mexico. Rebecca from Chicagoland. Alicia from Oakland. We have a LinkedIn friend from Sri Lanka and Aline from Brazil. We love having all of you. We're taking your questions, and a great question came in from our LinkedIn friends, Jennifer. This is long, so I won't put it on screen because I think it would block your head, but it's a fantastic question. And the person wants to know, they say the idea about the lack of autonomy being a contributor to burnout really resonates. And so this person wants to know, if you're a leader and you've been pretty autonomous for a while, how can you sort of put yourself in the shoes of employees that may not be experiencing this? How can you actually become a better leader and remember what it was like back in those days before you had a lot of autonomy as a leader? Do you have thoughts about that?
I have so many thoughts about this. This is something that I feel very strongly about. It's interesting because, lack of control, lack of autonomy is one of the 6 root causes of burnout. And what I was writing pre-pandemic was about how we need more flexibility, how people need to be able to have, the access to work remote. And then obviously, that shifted in the pandemic. So now it's about people still need that ability to kind of work when and where and how they need to work. There's a lot of focus right now on, on process, because a lot of leaders had to switch from, management by walking around to having to be remote. And there's this big lack of trust, and it created micromanaging. It created this sense of having to, control people's workflow. We've seen an increase in bossware, where people are, watching other people while they're working. So something shifted in the pandemic, and it reduced that trust, which is really playing into burnout. And so we need to recognize as leaders that we invested time, money, in attracting these people and developing this talent. And we need to make sure that we're giving them the space to get to where they need to go within their own process. We shouldn't care if people are sprinting or crawling over the finish line. It's about them getting there in their own way. Because if we start to take away people's intrinsic motivation, I mean, that's it. They're gone to us. So it's about saying, okay, let's create more shared goals within the team, so that we can help each other get to those goals. And also, when there's individual goals, have them map out how they think they want to get there. If you need to know what's going on, have them make that, those decisions for themselves. And it's all about hitting goals. It's not about the way that they get there. So more, expectations of what, you want to see in the end, and then giving that freedom to people. It's also about job crafting, which I write about in the book, this idea that, stop giving people that sort of description of what they're supposed to do in the day. It's about them feeling connected to the mission. Maybe it's telling them stories about what their job does for the final product or the stakeholder, the shareholder. What's the impact that they make every single day in what they do, and give them that agency to be able to get to where they want to go based on that motivation and those sort of shared inspirations to get there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We're here with Jennifer Moss. If you'd like to learn more about her work or her new book, The Burnout Epidemic, go to her website. It's jennifer-moss.com. And if you're enjoying these conversations, they happen every week, and you can learn more and sign up and get reminders. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Just go to dorieclark.com/LI. You can follow me there. You can also subscribe to my newsletter, where you will get reminders about these conversations. We want to say hi to some of the amazing friends who are joining us, many of whom join us every week, and we're so grateful. We have Manish joining from India. Rachel is here from Norway, and I hope Rachel is suitably extremely happy. Let's hope that is the case. Gail is in North Carolina. Vladimir is here in Angola. Davi is here from Brazil. Christine from Rochester. Allison from Dallas, Fort Worth. Susan in Nairobi. Tiago in Rio de Janeiro. Mehul from New Jersey. We have a LinkedIn friend from Northern California, one from Washington, one from London, and Regina in Calgary. We love having all of you. And we have, Jennifer, a question that came in, which I think is great, from a LinkedIn user. They are curious about new hires, people who may have been hired during the pandemic. They may have started remotely. They get onboarded to a company. They're like, what is this place? I can't even figure it out because it's just through a computer screen. What are you seeing with regard to those new hires, with regard to their rate of burnout, or how they're handling that?
This is a really excellent question, because we're just getting new data in on people's experience after being hired within the pandemic. We did some novel research within the pandemic, and found that, our younger generation, or older Gen Zs, younger millennials, were really struggling as they were entering into this cycle within the pandemic, that, they were already dealing with a lot of loneliness and isolation, because there's so much more people moving into these urban centers and living alone. There's more single occupancy dwellings. So then you have this isolation piece. Then you start inside the pandemic. These are young professionals that have less agency, less ability to really be able to make decisions about workload. They're the ones too that, you go into your first job and you kind of demonstrate who you are. You're showing your brand. And we kept hearing these verbatim saying, I've started this job in a pandemic. I don't know my boss. I'm not getting one-on-one time. I don't know my coworkers. I feel like my career is atrophying. So you're seeing this demographic impacted for sure, but across the board, we measured, and other data supporting this measurement around, if you started in the pandemic, you're about 30 to to 40% on average less likely to feel connected to your coworkers. You're about 32% lonelier than if you started pre-pandemic. So there's something about seeing people in person and meeting them eye to eye and having that connection, and then, using technology to augment that relationship. So many people love this story. I love your
Cat attack.
I have my dog in the background too. But I love that what we're realizing is that we have totally, swung the pendulum too far in the other direction. We have made it so that there's just no relationships and no effort to make work fun. And there's no levity, there's no serendipity, there's none of those things that actually are the thing that makes work fun. And it's kind of like going to school and only studying math and languages all day and never getting recess and never getting, extracurriculars or gym and that's missing. And so we need to sort of swing the pendulum back in the middle a little bit, where there's flexibility, there's the option to have remote work. But when we are together, forming those relationships in that time together, instead of just going into the office, spending more time on Zoom, and then going back home to do the same thing. Use the time in the office to be very strategic about building relationships. And that, I think, is going to really help that group that's feeling sort of left behind or lonely, because productive working relationships is a huge factor in company success.
Yeah, this is so true. We're here with Jennifer Moss. She's the author of the new book, The Burnout Epidemic. And I'm curious if for those of you who are tuning in, please type into the chat box. Let us know. Are you feeling burned out, or did you feel burned out during the pandemic? Where are you on the spectrum, on a 1 to 10 spectrum? How burned out are you at this moment? We're curious. We'd love to hear what you are experiencing. I'm seeing lots of great comments thanking Jennifer for her observations. And we want to say hi to some of the great friends who are joining us. Ryan is here from Washington State. Christian is tuning in from Alaska. Mona's in North Carolina. Jayanta is joining us. We have a LinkedIn friend from Florida. Sarah from California. Jeanette from Chile. We have Begum from Turkey. We have Yassine from Morocco. Sam from Salt Lake. And we have Rudy from France. Thank you all for joining us. We love it. And a question came in, Jennifer, from Haley. And Haley wants to know, how do you help managers who are working remotely with burnout, but the leaders are the problem? The leaders are driving this culture of being always on. And if you are the low man on the totem pole, there may not be, or there may not at least feel like, a lot you can do about it. If you want to be part of this culture, you've got to keep up. If you're feeling burned out, what do you do in those circumstances? We'd love your thoughts.
I get this question all the time because this is the major problem. It's actually why I wrote the book in the way that I did. There's a lot of very important and helpful books on how to deal with your own burnout, but I wrote this book for managers to say, come on, we need accountability and leaders and organizations, because you need to model the change. You need to change the legacy. And if you don't model self-care, you don't model, managing workload, if you don't manage these ways of solving for this problem, employees can't be what they can't see. There's constant invisible pressures. You say, don't answer your email on the weekends and in the evenings, but I'm going to do it, or not on vacation, but I'm going to that is not healthy. And so I've been really advocating for leaders to adjust, which is very difficult for them because they do have more autonomy to take breaks when they need it. And so they get to work when they want to work. And yet they have to really walk the talk. But there are ways that we can start to think, even as coworkers, we can make pacts with each other around right to disconnect, send laters on our emails. We can make sure that we have really strong etiquette about meeting, having that conversation with our team about how do we politely decline attending meetings. We're meeting 252% more in this last year. So there's just so much over collaboration. How do we make sure that if you don't need something urgently, you just add something to the email to say, hey, I don't need this right away. This is when I need it. Is that acceptable to you? It's just about like grandma's rules, having etiquette, being kind to each other, taking a couple extra minutes to give space, making sure that you don't think that everything's urgent. One of the byproducts of the pandemic has been that we have a sense of urgency all the time. And we're sort of living like that in our lives. Every single thing that comes through, even if it isn't urgent, we respond to it urgently. So try to give yourself that digital detox where you set a bedtime app, for example, and just be off. Use your out of office in the middle of the day to say, and not a week, not on vacations, in the middle of the day to say, I'm working on a heads down project. I just need an hour. I'll respond to your emails then. And then you can actually turn off the ping so your body doesn't flood itself with cortisol every time it hears a ping. So these are small, tiny habits. They're not going to solve institutional stress. Your boss has to do that, or your organization overall needs to do that. But these are just small, tiny hacks that we can start to embed so that we can be kinder to each other and give ourselves a little bit of a rest.
Really useful. Thank you very much. We're here with Jennifer Moss. She's the author of The Burnout Epidemic. You can find out more about her and her work at jennifer-moss.com. And we are here every Thursday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, 5 o'clock in London, talking about how to make your life better. I'm Dorie Clark here for Newsweek. We want to say hi to some of the amazing friends who are tuning in and joining us from around the world. We have so many great folks. Sandra is joining from the Dominican Republic. Bruno from Mozambique. Engi is here from the Philippines. We have Bree from Knoxville. We have Annette from SoCal. And we have India from Orange County. And we have many more folks joining us. Thank you so much. And great questions are coming in. A lot of people are really resonating with this, Jennifer. We have one LinkedIn friend saying, I am so burned out that I'm at my last 2 weeks of work, freaking out about finding a new role, but I realize remote work is not for me, at least not full time. I think probably, some people are loving remote work and other people are finding that it actually exacerbates their stress. So a lot of different reactions to all of this. I am curious about your perspective, Jennifer, on another question. Alicia wants to know, if you have an employee, let's say you're a manager, and if you have an employee that is just so burned out that they have lost access to their motivation. It's not even that, they can't get motivated. It's like their motivation is in another galaxy. Yeah. What do we do about that? How do we help this person? Can we help this person?
That person probably needs some additional support. And the thing is with managers, and just human beings, we have this sort of discomfort in approaching someone that we know is going through something. And so I've been really advocating across the board for every individual and in organizations to take a mental health first aid course. It's really great if you're a manager to be able to handle certain situations and be able to have conversations and know, what body language you use in these types of conversations. But we also aren't supposed to be mental health professionals. We're supposed to be mental health conduits. So research up on maybe some tools that you have available within your organization. Is there anything in your employee assistance program that maybe could support? Is there something that's within, your ability to be able to provide that time and that space to get healthy? Having a conversation with that person to say, I want you to spend, even just a couple days really writing down what you think is causing your burnout. Is it workload? Are you dealing with other types of pressures? Is it difficult? We saw a lot of women disproportionately impacted by the pandemic because of the juggling of so many other demands. And is it that you can't separate? Is there no bifurcation between your work and life? Take some time and just really journal what you think is going on. And then let's come back and have a conversation about it and maybe come up with some solutions for how I can support you better. I don't know how to help if I can't, really figure out and get to the root of what's causing you the stress. So have that conversation and it starts the ball rolling, but making sure in the meantime that you're getting as much information about what may be able to, what may be a good solution from a mental health support standpoint. And, if all else fails, we do need to make sure that that person gets time to recover. When we have hit the wall, I interviewed Dr. Marie Asberg, who is based out of Switzerland, and she is incredibly, involved in just what does the therapy look like for those people that have hit the wall. We can look at recoveries that take almost 18 months to 2 years because it takes about 2 years to get to that wall. It can take 4 months to 18 months to 2 years to recover. And we only get that with with therapeutics, cognitive behavioral therapy, peer support, family support. So if it really is at that point, don't let it go on too long that we're not addressing it, because it could mean that that person is not just intrinsic, like lacking intrinsic motivation. They're gone. You've lost them permanently from your team. So if you really want to keep that person protected, then that's kind of the avenue you have to take.
That's a great point. Jennifer Moss, she's the author of The Burnout Epidemic. We have amazing friends joining us. We have Phaedra from Connecticut. We have Gabriela from Uruguay. Juanita is joining us from Colombia. And we have Mayur joining us from Pune, India. We love having all of you. And Jennifer, a question that I'm curious about. If you were advising a kind of low-hanging fruit activity for all of us, I mean, theoretically, the pressures are intense enough these days that any of us might become burned out. But if, let's assume for the sake of argument, we're not in a dire situation now, but like everybody else, we're kind of a generally stressed out professional. What are one or two things that we could bake into our routines and our schedules that would serve as a prophylactic measure to make sure we never get to that wall, as you were describing?
This is really important. A lot of my earlier work, and I wrote the book Unlocking Happiness at Work, and it was all about the idea of psychological fitness and the neurosciences of happiness. It's about neuroplasticity, and in organizations about tiny incremental shifts over time that make the change. It's not an overhaul. And we can do that as well. I mean, it's how we build up the habit of, putting our seatbelt on, brushing our teeth, basic hygiene stuff. It should only take a couple minutes. But what I highly recommend, if you're just feeling like, this sort of chronic stress and you need a little bit of breathing room, I keep reminding people that there's this great hack that we can have in the brain, and it's all about priming. This idea that there's things that we recognize out in the world, and it stimulates a memory or thinking, like walking past the movie theater makes us think of popcorn. We have to create these primes in our day. So making sure that if you're not maybe taking those breaks every hour like we should, I would say, if you can, you should. But if you can't, make 2 times in the day where you take a very specific break. It's calendared. I know there's a lot of things that will drop it off, but if there's a way that you can create one time of the day that's very specific and routined, it could be before or after work, whatever that is, but it's that space of 10 to 15 minutes where you are always consistently doing what I call like a frivolous 15. It's not supposed to be frivolous. It actually gives you so much recharging. But it is like 15 minutes, go for a walk at the exact same time every day. Maybe it's at the end of the day, change into home clothes, get out of the day clothes and go into home clothes.
Mr. Rogers strategy. I like it.
It is very much a prime. I mean, it's this psychological benefit to say, okay, I'm done my day, especially if you're remote, and now I'm going into my other part of my world where I'm wearing these clothes that are different. So it's creating these primes where what happens over time when your brain starts to believe you that you're actually taking this same, break every day, it starts to actually do this cool thing where you get sort of this increase just leading up to it of these healthy, relaxing hormones and chemicals that sort of flood your body. And it says, okay, it's relaxing time now. So you're getting this additional benefit of your body preparing for rest. So instead of it being like constantly triggered all the time, which is unsustainable, it creates this space and this flow where you can then get some time. Then you can feel a bifurcation between work and life. You feel these benefits of that chemistry. And then you're doing something in that 15 minutes that aren't related to anything with a goal. It's about maybe sitting out on your front porch and being bored for 15 minutes. Maybe it's reading a, magazine or reading a book that is not work related. It's just a nonfiction or fiction book where you're just, enjoying yourself. Maybe it's taking a bath. Maybe it's just sitting outside and looking up at, at the sky. Whatever it is, it's about doing something that just gives you a peace of mind, 15 minutes, and then you can go back into the rest of your life. These things really do help you get that space that you need. And that, like, it sounds like it's so oversimplified, but there's so much great neuroscience that backs up why we should be doing it like this.
So useful. Thank you very much. This is Jennifer Moss. You can learn more about her and her work at jennifer-moss.com. She's the author of the new book, The Burnout Epidemic. We want to thank all the wonderful friends tuning in. We had Henry joining us from Oakland, Shashitara from Houston, Linda from Boston, Ernesto from Miami, and all of you. Thank you for joining us. We're here every Thursday, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. If you've enjoyed the conversation and want friends to benefit from Jennifer's insights about burnout and how we can all take better care of ourselves, hit the like button and hit the share button. And Jennifer Moss, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining in. It was incredible to see how far reaching this conversation goes. So thank you.
Thank you all, and we'll see you next week.